Greetings, friends. In medieval times, there were the serfs, who were tied to the land. There were peasants, who had a bit more freedom. There were free men, who could move around. And then there were the lesser nobility. And the lesser nobility were from the gentleman to the esquire to the knight. Those were all given their titles. So they could have come from lower down, and by their service or by distinguishing themselves, they earned that rank. But after knight, it was all hereditary. So there were the hereditary knights, and then above that, the barons, and the baronet and baron. I'm not sure if that's like male and female, I'm not sure. Then there were the viscounts, the counts or earls. A count was in charge of a county, which was a basic political unit. Then there were the margraves and the marquis or marquess. That has to do with a march. A march is like a territory between two nations, like a borderland between, I don't know, like Denmark and whatever German state was beneath it. There would be like a march between that. There would be like a Belgian march between France and what is now Belgium. So you got to be in charge of that land if you were a margrave. Then after that, there was the sovereign prince, and then the duke, which we're familiar with, or maybe not. A duke was pretty much right below the king. So in the English Civil War, it's like you have to watch out for those dukes because they could usurp you. But actually, technically, above duke, there's prince, grand duke, archduke. But it's all pretty much similar to a duke. And then after that, of course, is the king. And the king is king of a land, of a certain people. Generally, that's, although, I guess you could be king of more than one people. But the idea with an emperor is he's ruling over an empire. I guess a king could rule over an empire, but generally an emperor is like ruling over a collection of different peoples. So there'd be like the Roman Empire and the Roman Emperor, like Caesar in the past, and then there was the Holy Roman Emperor for hundreds of years, although he didn't have quite the same power. And then there was the Chinese Emperor, the Japanese Emperor during World War II, or before World War II. So And like medieval society in Europe, also pre World War II Japan also had a lot of hierarchy. They had basically why am I going on about this? A lot of you people probably don't want to hear about nobility. Oh, that's the elite. Well, I'm trying to show that there was. We've been demystified. I don't know what the reverse. I don't want to say that the world was mystical back then. That doesn't sound quite right. But there was a certain transcendent quality to society, to the institutions in society, to many of the offices in society. Now there can be good institutions, maybe there can be bad institutions. I don't know, there can be good people and bad people in the institutions themselves. But when you create order through chaos, like the Freemasons wanted to do and have done, and then that they've done through corporations, which also create order through chaos, in building the New World Order. If you want to do that, then you have to you have to demystify this old world. You have to, and so it's not just communism that did this. It's also capitalism, corporations that equalize the world, and they push the leftist idea of equality, that they celebrate equality, and they push equality, like equality between a man and woman, equality between everything, like man and animal, and all this radical equality. And everyone has to be somehow judged the same, but then people aren't the same. It's not coherent, but it doesn't matter. But it has the effect of creating chaos, bringing down the high offices, and allowing for a power vacuum that can be filled by someone who takes advantage of it. But whether or not the corporate leaders, they may or may not actually believe in this radical equality. And of course, the corporate world has to have its own hierarchy. There has to be a CEO. There has to be someone smart enough to order other people around. However, the corporate leaders, they believe in, and they have their own form of equality, which is reducing everything to money. reducing everything to its material value. The corporation is kind of an inverse of an old. It's kind of like it's similar to an institution in that it's a metaphysical category. Like the corporation is invisible. It's a collection of people, so it's a real thing. But in a legal sense, it doesn't exist. Like it is a legal person. In other words, is what I'm trying to say. Even though it may or may not have any one person directly responsible for that corporation. Note that there are exceptions to that. This is how the corporations can usurp power in this sort of sly way, by behaving like legal people, but spreading the responsibility. And there's no moral foundation guiding any corporation. I mean, there could be, but that depends on the people. But in principle, the corporation itself is just meant to satisfy its shareholders. You want to use the corporation to get more money. And now corporations may help people genuinely. They may help their surrounding area. They may. Often they do not. But my point is that that's not their guiding principle. Generally speaking, I think we can all agree on that generally most corporations, at least when they get to a certain size, they become depersonalized. They don't care about the ordinary person. They probably don't care much about their own employees. Yes, they do provide good benefits in certain corporations, but you can look at that they're doing that for cynical reasons. You got to keep your people happy if you want to hold on to them. But at the end of the day, it's like, yes, corporations can contribute to a lot of good in the world, but it's the completion of this process of demystification, de-enchantment. So all these institutions go away. There's no more nobility. Why would I even mention the church? When I say if I was to say the church, then people, what church do you mean? Do you mean the Baptist church of whatever down the road? It's like no, there's no point in even saying the church. If you'd said that a few centuries ago, it would have meant something. It would have meant an overarching institution. But now we still have, we're losing more institutions. You could say the police. They want to get rid of that. The vacuum is going to be filled by something else, by something corporate probably, or the army. People want to get rid of soldiers and get rid of armies. But of course, something will fill the gap. Because these things have to exist. They're part of our condition. What else? Like universities. Well, those have already been pretty much reduced. So the corporation is based on money, and it's part of this evil trinity of money, mind manipulation, which the media takes care of, and technology. Because a world which is based solely on money, where you look at everything in terms of dollar signs, and that's not bad to consider the financial aspect to things, but when that becomes your only focus, then you get a world that pours all of its creative energy into technology or science, because you have a materialistic worldview based only on money. Then technology is the logical progression from that starting point, because if it's all about material stuff, then technology is the best way to manipulate and create material things and change the world. Change the physical world, change your own physical bodies, whatever it is. Now, the elites may or may not let you or I enjoy the new technology. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. When they do, it's for certain reasons. This happened with the automobile. There was a different purpose for the automobile in the 1920s to the 60s than it was after that. And now they're taking it in a whole new direction with how they want people to live. And also, of course, reducing the global population. Reducing the global population is not something you have to look very far to find. That's actually quite well publicized, that they want the world population significantly reduced. And of course, there will be technological means to accomplish this population reduction. There's already birth control, contraception, abortions, of course. Abortion, which also fills the age-old child sacrifice rites. It's the reappearance of that. And of course, there are the Vaselines, which I think you know I'm using a code word there. But the Vaselines, they can be used for this purpose as well. I'm not saying that every Vaseline is used for that purpose, but from what we've seen if in Ethiopia and India, courtesy of the Bill and Melinda Gates, we've seen what the sterilization that can happen. I'm not making that up, by the way. Go look it up. And so this technological corporate world, government, that institution also dissolves because everything, the sacred nature of, well, not sacred, but the enchanted, transcendent aura of all of these institutions, that gets dissolved, and then a lot of them just melt into the corporate world. So government is already tied at the hip with the corporations. For example, you can see this with the media in Canada, the CBC, the Toronto Star, Globe and Mail, Global News. I don't know. You know, all the major newspapers and TV stations, they get millions and millions of dollars from the Canadian taxpayers, courtesy of the Trudeau government. But if it was the Conservative Party in power, I don't think it would be much different. They're not journalists. They're just extensions of a state propaganda or not state. I wouldn't even say state propaganda. It's more like corporate public relations. It's more like what it is, and programming, mind manipulation. This technological world run by technocrats, run by corporate people, run by at the most fundamental level the money power. This is a world which will be searching after a false god, will be worshiping a false god, and it will lead to ruin. And I was discussing the nobility at the beginning of this video, the former nobility. I mean, there kind of still is nobility, but it's lost. It's not really the same thing anymore. Because what happened was, and I'm not saying the nobility was perfect, of course, but I'm just saying the idea of that institution of hierarchy in our society is not a bad thing. But what happened was that increasingly, leading up to the Industrial Revolution, but really before that, money came and it destabilized the original nobility, because you got the new rich, the merchants and stuff, and they were able to buy their rank, essentially. And then below them there were the bourgeois who were not quite wealthy enough to be nobles, but they kind of aspired. They looked up to the nobles, but they were essentially like urban middle class, and they were very influential in bringing about the French Revolution, which was another upturner of old institutions. And currently in 2020, I mean, we see these corporations now overturning the entire economy, and it's all about market share. It's meant to increase their bottom line, their market share, and their money, and by disenfranchising and destroying hundreds of thousands of small businesses and impoverishing millions of families throughout the world, particularly the Western world, creating more taxpayers and more slaves for their corporate machine. I mean, look at the government of China, look at the CCP, look how they're behaving in Africa. They're essentially not behaving much differently than like some sort of mega conglomeration of corporations. They're just colonizing Africa, and it's all about resource extraction to satisfy their industry back in China. Hasta luego, amigos.